Hey there, I want to talk about Facebook advertising and in this final stretch time frame. We got about 7 weeks left. What I'm super concerned about is I keep hearing smaller campaigns assume they're going to spend all their money in the last 2 weeks. And that is a horrible idea for a number of reasons. One, it's going to cost you more. Two, you might not get your ads approved. So with the changes to the Facebook timeline, it is absolutely critical that campaigns are thinking about this timeline, making sure you're approved now and starting to run your ads today, not then, and to know that by the 26th, any ad that you want to run for the end of the election has to be up and running. So I want to make sure we walk through these timelines and you understand how critical it is to be running ads today, to be maximizing the timeline, to make sure you're approved, because if not, you're going to spend more money and get less of a reach. And if you wait too long, you literally won't be able to run ads on Facebook. So let's jump into it. All right, so let's jump into this. First of all, I just want to make sure we're all working from the same framework because I know a lot of folks who are working on smaller campaigns aren't Facebook marketers, aren't digital marketers, right? So Facebook records all interactions with people, pages, posts, groups, whatever it is that you're engaging with. They call all of that signals. So however you're interacting with things on Facebook, it is recording that as a signal, right? It's showing Facebook what you like to interact with, what pages you're more likely to see content from. Now, Facebook's algorithm, as much as they will disclose, is really driven by these four things. And this is what ranks content and then is what decides if it's going to be shown in your newsfeed or the newsfeed of your supporters. Number one is inventory. Inventory of all posts available to display. The average person's page, right? They like anywhere from a couple to hundreds of pages. They're in groups. They're interacting with anywhere from hundreds to thousands of people, which means there are potentially thousands of posts that Facebook is sorting through to display for one person at any one given time. Signals are what tell Facebook what each post is, right? Is this a post from a close relative, a close friend? Is this a post from a page or a person I engage with a lot? They then create predictions on how you'll react to each post, right? Will you interact with it? Will you engage it? And a final score is assigned to the content based on all of these factors. Now, we can't see that score. We never get to see that score. What we see, this is what we know goes into it. And what comes out in our news feeds are the end product of this, right? And so we do know that a couple of key things influence signals. One is just literally content, right? If a page is not putting out content, so this means if your candidate or your down ballot initiative or whatever it is not posting consistently. And by consistently, I mean at least once a day and ideally in the 3 to 5 times a day range. You literally can't pick up signals, right? And so if you're not giving people content to interact with, Facebook can't decide whether or not people want your content, right? So first of all, you need to be posting at least once a day, ideally 3 to 5 times a day. And they might say, oh my God, is that too much? No, it's not too much. The people who really like you, which will be very few, will see possibly 3 pieces of content. The reality is only about 5 to 10% of everyone who likes your page will see any of your content, right? And so we're definitely talking about why we need to do advertising and why this timeline really matters. So what sends these positive signals? Commenting. So if someone comments on there, that's a fairly strong signal. Now, what you should be doing from your page is also commenting back and replying, boosting the power of that signal. Sharing is probably the most valuable thing. Share is basically an endorsement. Whether or not we think of it that way or not, we are endorsing or saying we want someone else to consume this content. So getting people to share your page's content is really important. And then reacting is probably the lowest, right? It's you know, the thumbs up, the heart, the hug, whatever it is, the little emoji thing that comes up. And then there are some passive signals. They don't carry as much weight, if any weight at all, or they're close to neutral. Clicking, watching, viewing. You think about the viewing one, right? It's some videos start in our timeline anyways. They don't really know if it's playing because we just stop scrolling or if we're actually trying to watch it, right? So these don't carry as heavy as a weight as actually engaging. So what this means for you, this is scenario 1 for the rest of the electoral cycle, right? If you were starting next week, this is what it would look like and what it should look like. Now we'll talk through 2 other scenarios that are between less good and absolutely horrible. So in this scenario, you know, let's say I've got $1,000, $2,000 to spend on the entire cycle. What I'm hearing from campaigns is they want to save this money until the end. And that's a really bad idea. We're going to break this down in detail, but the essence of it is you need to start sending signals now to Facebook. You need to start reaching an audience. What will that do for you? By sending signals now, you will actually reach more people. You'll start to bring in people who like your content, who will organically share it. By them organically sharing it, that helps Facebook better model who is more likely to engage with your content. That's how they're going to send the advertising. What that does is it lowers the cost and expands the reach and engagement, right? Your goal along this axis is to drive as much engagement as possible. This is the time. We're not showing the cost here, but what you can assume is that on a positive trend line, you're getting more engagement. You're probably spending more money, but you're getting higher engagement per dollar also. And there's some really important flags here, because we know that basically you can't create any new creative after the 26th at midnight, right? So this week before the election is going to be really critical, and even the week prior to that, super critical. Now, scenario 2, which I hear a lot of folks kind of preparing for, is like, oh, we're just going to run our ads in the last 2 weeks. If I literally had the same amount of money, this is what my engagement trend line would look like. I would literally reach fewer people, spend as much money, right? So I'm going to reach fewer people. It's going to cost me more for the reach I do get. And in these critical moments, my overall reach is going to be down, right? So if you think that time is important, then that means advertising now is important. In the worst case scenario, you try to post your very first ad and try to get approved within 72 hours before October 26th. I can almost guarantee that ad won't get approved because you've not run ads before. You're not a known entity to Facebook, which will mean you will literally run nothing, right? So folks coming in late trying to do this, you'll literally run nothing. So let's look at this and layering them together. The best option is to start spending now. Start sending positive signals to Facebook, start engaging with real audiences. Also, you'll start to know what messages and content work with audiences, right? So you need to spend a little now to get more reach, right? And I'm not talking about crazy amounts, right? So we did this model the other day for budgets for folks. If I had $1,500, I'd probably be spending $100 a week through here. And here I'd probably be spending a few hundred dollars, and let's say I've got 1,000, or let's say we have $1,500 total. I'd probably spend about $1,000 over these 2 weeks, maybe 100 here. And, and across these weeks, I'm probably spending 80, $100. Now the math isn't perfect, but I think you get the gist. What you'll see is, your first ad will cost you more per engagement because Facebook doesn't know you, right? And so you're going to go in, you're going to promote a post to some targeted audiences that are important for you to turn out. And then if you're spending the same amount of money, what you will see is a positive trend line where if I'm spending the same amount of money over these 4 weeks, I will probably start to get more reach and engagement. Also, what the force multiplier here will be, people will be sharing my content, right? So the scenario 2, same amount of money, and my engagement looks like this, right? My total raw engagement is lower. My total engagement through those last 2 weeks are lower. And then the worst scenario, I try to run this late and nothing happens, right? And so that is worst case scenario down there. Now, 2 other important milestones here to think about. Number 1, October 26th by midnight Pacific time. Now, you could also say October 27th at 12:01 a.m. I don't like to say that. I think that's more confusing personally. For me, I say October 26th at midnight. Ads must be live and delivering, right? That means you can't go try to place an ad there. And really big shout out, we'll include the link to Beth Becker's article she really broke this down early on for a lot of folks. This means your ad needs to be approved, needs to be running and spending money. So it can take 72 hours or more to get your ad approved. If it's not approved, if you post an ad and it gets rejected for some reason, you have to run it again, it could take another 72 hours for approval, right? So what we're really talking about there is 6 days, almost a week before the 26th, which means 2 weeks before Election Day. Also, after the 26th, editing targets or budgets will be allowed. You can't change your creative, but it could trigger another 72-hour window. Now, for some folks, it'll be a couple hours, right? You'll be known entities, you've run a whole bunch of ads, you'll be all right. But for a lot of folks, you will not be. Now, The other thing I'm flagging here, October 24th, by that morning, you have to have your ads loaded. Anything that you even want to test through that final week needs to be loaded. I would have it loaded and running. It can take 72 hours or more to get approved. If you haven't run ads, you need to back this out to the 20th or 21st. If this for some reason is your first time running ads, if you have somehow watched this video and said, you know, I'm not going to follow the advice, I'm going to try to wait to the end, for God's sakes, at the very least, start placing your ad and turn it on the 20th or 21st, because if it gets rejected, you need another 72 hours to get approved. And we've seen in the past, it's taken at least 72 hours in these high volume times when people are trying to get all of their ads in at once. And here, October 24th, 26th, if you are trying to attempt to load your very first ad in this time period, you will likely not be approved. This means you will be able to run zero ads. So that money you have on hand, you won't get some of the best value engagement that you could get. Lots of reasons. I don't love Facebook. Facebook is by far the best way to advertise to folks around the election cycle. It is the cheapest, most impactful way to reach the highest volume of folks. If you wait this long, you're probably not going to be able to run any ads. So, you know, that's the reality. The other part of this is if you are not verified, it can take up to 2 weeks to get verified, right? So I fill out my form. I have to wait to get something back in the mail. You know, it's still coming back in about a week for most folks, but for a lot of folks, it's taken 2 weeks, right? And so what this means, you must get approved to run ads. With a mailed document, it can take at least 2 weeks to be approved. It is likely that 2 weeks before the 26th will not be enough time, right? Because you have to get that back in hand, right? And so really, October 4th is probably your cutoff date to get approved to run new ads, right? Because it's going to take 2 weeks to get it back. And then you got to run some stuff. Because what I'm saying here, and let's just go back a slide, right? If you fill this out on October 11th and it takes you 2 weeks to get it back, and on the 24th, you technically can run an ad with your disclaimer, you might not make that 72-hour window. It's going to be your very first ad. If this thing shows up in your inbox on the 25th, I can guarantee you won't be able to run an ad for the first time. You just won't get approved. It'll take 72 hours to get approved. Won't happen for you. Won't be able to run an ad. So absolutely right now, fill out, if you've not done this, if you're working on issues or a candidate campaign, you need to get approved. If not, you're not going to run ads at the end. You need to get that stuff in right now. I would not push it beyond October 4th. So if you're watching this on October 15th, probably out of luck. Probably not going to run ads. Now you can find someone else who's verified, have them come in as an admin on your page and do those things, right? So you might need to find some outsourced help, possibly work with an agency. So let's break this down. Again, this is the scenario I see a lot of campaigns setting themselves up for. Maybe they're getting approved over the next week or two. They will have the ability to run ads. So you start running your first ad, say October, 18th. Minimal range for engagement, few signals, right? So your page has not sent a lot of good positive signals before and has not sent advertising signals before. Your costs are going to be higher. Then whatever you're running on the 26th is what you're locked into. You're locked in with decreased signals and decreased testing, right? Because maybe you ran 3 ads in those 4 days before the final approvals happen. That's it. Those are the ads you have to work with through the rest of the election cycle. You'll be spending more. You'll drive less engagement through that final stretch, and you will see it tank. It will tank for you. Why will it tank? Because in those last 3 days, all of the big super PACs, the big presidential races, all of the big budget campaigns and organizations will have a relationship with Facebook. We'll be able to turn up their budget a whole lot more easily. They'll be spending a whole lot more in those final days. And your little page that has sent very few positive signals, which is spending very little, will get drowned out by those. Your cost will go up because you're now competing with them. They're willing to pay more. And your overall reach and engagement are probably going to tank. Also because you didn't test your creative ahead of time. You didn't have a variety of ads. You didn't know what messaging was working best for you on Facebook. You might have other reasons to think other messaging is working well for you in different places. But did you test it on Facebook? Probably not. You're stuck with these ads. You're stuck with them for over a week, right? Because you had to have them up and running before the 26th. And then the 27th through the 3rd, the same ad is up. Unless you've paused it, which if you pause it, it could take 72 hours to turn it back on. So that ad's going to be diminishing returns in those last couple of days. The ideal scenario, the scenario I want you to take away, start spending now. Hopefully you're already approved. If not, right, you need to shift this up and you'll probably be spending around the 3rd of October, 1st of October. Facebook engagement, you're going to get good values. You're going to start sending signals. You're actually going to start expanding your reach early. You're expanding your electorate. You know, if you have vote by mail, early vote, you know, I would shift this whole thing back and I'd be spending a little bit more back here. Now, if we're doing that well, by week 4 of doing this, right, which is mid-October, you're going to be sending a lot of positive signals. You're going to be getting reaches into targeted audiences. You're going to be seeing what content works, what doesn't, put a little bit more behind what works. Facebook is then modeling for better value. Facebook wants you to spend more money there. So what will they do? They will have 4 weeks of data to know, well, when this page runs ads to these groups of folks, this is the kind of engagement that they get. And like here, folks are also likely to see this and be interested. So we'll help them expand their reach. And on all of these ads that you run, some people will share it. So you'll get expanded organic reach, which will decrease the cost of the ad. Facebook will say like, oh, wow, people like this so much, they're sharing it. Let's serve this to more people. You get to this point, we're going to increase our budget. We're going to do our final testing. We're going to leverage those signals we've been building, and we're going to reach even deeper audiences, right? Now, you know, if you have a high early vote turnout, right, you might pull this back here, and you might really be thinking about by the middle of that week prior, you're really going to ramp up spending, maybe add in another test or two. What this will let us do is we will be able to figure out what is our best messaging. We will have it locked in for the 26th. The ads will be live and running to meet the Facebook deadline at midnight Pacific time on the 26th. Our final spend, the costs are likely to increase regardless, right? So we talked about that tanking effect for the other folks, and it's going to go down for you. Why? Because these ads have been up, right? The ads have been up for a while. You can't update the creative. It's even dicey to update the audiences. Your reach will decrease. You'll be spending less over the last couple of days. Your reach will decrease for a number of reasons. And most folks are going to be pretty locked into voting by that point anyways, right? And so, you know, if turnout is happening, it's probably happening in some other places, or, you know, whatever kind of field or phone operation you're doing, and light touch on Facebook at this point, right? So you've driven really good engagement. You've really gotten your name ID up, and you kind of have to just accept fate of what it is there at the end. So quick recap. Scenario 1, you try to run those ads late, literally nothing happens. Scenario 2, you start a little bit sooner, but you're still pushing up against this deadline. You've been approved to run ads. Same amount of money. If I'm spending $1,500, I'm spending $10,000. Dollar to dollar, spending early will get you more engagement, and it'll look like this, right? So spending late cost you more, or same amount of money, it'll cost you more for each engagement, and it will tank sooner, versus spending now, building those signals. Do what Facebook is asking you to do. They're giving you this guidance. They've been giving us this guidance. I'm trying to make sure this guidance gets to you. So if you've seen this, if you're working on a campaign or with an organization who's planning on running ads near the end of the election cycle, start today. If you know someone who's running for office, if you know someone working in an organization, please share this video with them. I want to help make sure that folks get the information that they need and that they can get out there and win their ballot initiative, their campaign, whatever it is you're trying to do, want to make sure you win.